Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Pavini Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic and science. Pavini explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, and welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We're in the business of healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. I'm your host, Pavini Moray, and I'm delighted to introduce you today to Sylvie Minot. Sylvie is the executive director and founder of the nonprofit Syzygy Dance Project. And since 2000, Sylvie has taught weekly 5 rhythms dance classes and workshops in the Bay Area, New York, throughout the United States and Mexico. She also brings dance to a variety of underserved populations, including inmates, veterans, at-risk youth, recovering addicts, and hospital patients. Sylvie received her BA in dance from San Jose State University and is a certified 5 rhythms teacher who is trained in the Heartbeat map by Gabrielle Roth. And she has also studied psychology, indigenous healing rituals, energy medicine, and sound healing, and is inspired by the teachings of Angeles Arian, Carolyn Myss, and Tito La Rosa. Sylvie is often described as a catalytic shapeshifter because of her ability to meet people right where they are and move with them into new possibilities. And you can find out more about Sylvie's work on her website, www.syzygydanceproject.org. And I'm just going to spell that for you. It's SYZYGYDANCEPROJECT.org, Syzygy Dance Project. And I just want to add that back in 2008, Sylvie was my first 5 rhythms dance teacher. And through dancing with her, I have learned really more about my body and my heart than I had ever experienced up until that point. And she's a fantastic facilitator and holds a really strong container for self-exploration and healing. And I invite you to dance with her if you ever get the chance. So Sylvie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is definitely mine. I am just wondering if you would speak a little bit about the 5 rhythms and the map that you use when working with ancestors.
Sure, yes, I would love to. So the 5 rhythms was introduced or created by Gabrielle Roth. She was a dancer and she also observed people, and she saw that these 5 rhythms were in all of us. And so she created a map that actually pulled out these rhythms that she saw, and she labeled them flow, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. And there are many maps. So the first thing about flowing is this continuous grounding energy that moves through you. And it's also the rhythm of the feet. The feet is where we ground ourselves. In staccato, we move up to the hips. It's more linear, more defined, more structure. And as we move up the body to chaos, which is the rhythm around the mind and the merging of staccato and flow, and this is also the rhythm of release and creativity. And from there, you go to lyrical, where it's about joy and the essence, the resource is in the hands. The rhythm of joy, where everything is a little more light. It's like after you've released everything from chaos, you find this place of lightness. And then we come back into stillness, which is a place where is everything and all. And it's also the rhythm of compassion. And I've been teaching the 5 rhythms since 2010 and use many of her maps. And when I started doing the ancestors work, I linked it to the flowing rhythm as not as the female lineage of our ancestry. And because flowing is also has a feminine energy to it, and not to, say one's feminine and one's masculine, but sometimes there's essences that, feels a little more continuous. How do you call it? More fluid. And so in staccato, I worked with the masculine, the male lineage of the ancestry. And in chaos, I work with the tribe where it comes from the union of the two. You know, which tribe are you from? And in lyrical, I work with the animal clan. And in stillness, I work with the land that we all come from. So that's, in essence, how the 5 rhythms map works with the ancestors' work.
I mean, I think that there's such a ritualized quality to 5 rhythms, right? It's definitely, there's an arc to it, and it starts someplace and takes you to many other places, finally landing in still. And I really like what you're saying about how different rhythms connect with different lineages. And I'm imagining also with particular ancestors as well. Yeah.
Yes. You know, like I mentioned, like we all have kind of our favorite rhythm, and we all have, we're more attracted to one rhythm than another, but all of these are part of us, and the same thing with the ancestors. So, you know, certain ancestors may be a little bit more fluid and others may be a little more structured. And so these are kind of organic, very organic, natural rhythms. And depending on the teacher, you know, sometimes some people use it more of a psychological aspect of the 5 rhythms. Some people use more a sacred ritual, you know, a mystical. Some people use very body oriented, very physical. So it all depends on what part of the map you want to use. And that's the beautiful thing about this map, is that it encompasses it all. You can just focus on one part of the map, or you can use all of them. And I tend to work more with the more mystical, the more, you know, ritualistic. I love working with ancestors. I just feel like it's such a rich topic. And, you know, it's in our body. Our ancestors are in our bones, in our blood, in our DNA. And so to be able to acknowledge that and move with that brings so much transformation and so much healing.
I really love it when I'm dancing, and I have that sense of either dancing with my ancestors or my ancestors dancing through me. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about that, the embodied connection that we can have with our ancestors. In particular, you know, how do we really find it? How do we know it in our bodies? That's our ancestors, or that's a connection with our ancestors.
Yeah. You know, like I was saying, it's so much inside ourselves, because, you know, it's passed along, right, from generation to generation, and the DNAs don't leave us. And so I love it when you say, you know, like being able to embody that part or dancing with our ancestors is just a very magical moment. And for me, it's really, it all starts with being able to be inside your body, you know, and so many of us, you know, I work with so many different population, and that's the hardest thing for people to feel okay about being in their body, you know, because of whatever trauma or whatever ideas are put inside ourselves. So we always start with like, can we be in our body? Can we feel, you know, our fingertips? Can we feel the blood flowing through us? Can we feel the bones? You know, like even touching the bones of my hand is a way of feeling, you know, that sense, that grounded sense. Can I feel my feet on the ground? Can I really, you know, feel not just the blood, but the energy moving through me? And once you're connected to your body, you can't help but feel like it's bigger than me. You know, it's like, this is more than just who I am. It's like all this, you know, the generations before me kind of has a part in creating me as a person. So yeah, usually I would just have people really ground themselves first, really work with, you know, again, the rhythm of flow, to really ground, to really find your feet on the ground, and start from there to really create a place of safety. And then you start to go and find out, okay, where in my body does the movement want to go? And if we're inviting in ancestors, and I want to say, before I inviting ancestors or any kind of spirit, I always create kind of a bubble, kind of a protection bubble to acknowledge that anything that comes in relationship to this dance or to me is for the good of all concerned. Because, you know, there's a lot of ancestors there that are not so safe.
Right.
And so it's really about creating a safe container for us, and also a safe place for the ancestors to come in, because they may think, oh, is this okay for me to come too? So having this, I call it the bubble of protection, kind of gives permission and gives protection to both us and the ancestor. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. Yeah, I really like the focus on safety. And I absolutely agree with you that not all of the dead are equally well. And so it makes sense that we would create intention about who we are dancing with, not just like any old spirit or ancestor that shows up, but really making certain that it's safe for us. But I hadn't really thought about the part about it being safe for them. And that's really interesting to me, because I think about one of the impacts of trauma, right, is that it doesn't feel safe to be in the body, like you were saying. And yeah, I just wonder if like if I'm making my body a safe place for me, and I'm making my body a safe place for my ancestors. Yeah, would you talk a little just about how healing can happen in that way for them, for me, through dance?
Yeah, so once we create this place of safety and the invitation of the ancestors to come in, you start to move in a way that you start to find shapes. And the magical thing about dance is when you go so much into your body, you start to the mind starts to let go, and you're not thinking about, oh, how do I move, or how would my ancestor dance, or where's my ancestor in my body? Something else starts to take over if you just really go with like I said, feeling the bones, the blood, the muscles moving, and the DNA that's in there, and bringing in the invitation. Your body will start to move, and then you'll start to get senses of like, oh, maybe my ancestor is hanging on my shoulder over here. And then your shoulder starts to move, and then you start to dance with that. So what happens is then there is no story anymore. There's just this dance between you and your ancestor. And maybe we'll do a repetitive movement together. Oh yeah, I remember, maybe it's something that you remember that your great grandmother, if you're lucky enough to meet her, oh, this is what she does. Or maybe you find you embody a movement that you don't even know, that seems like, oh, this doesn't seem like my movement, but this is interesting. And so you get to follow and investigate movement. And how that brings healing is that it bypasses the story. Because I find that a lot of emotions, trauma, is when something happens to us, it gets repeated over and over and over. And before you know it, we can't let go of that story. And so for us to be able to move with the essence, to move with whatever is happening in the body, we're not attached to that story. And it doesn't mean like minimizing or, thinking that they didn't happen, but you're bringing a different essence. Dancing, if you ask almost everybody that dances after they've let go of their inhibitions, they would say it brings them joy. That's why people dance. And, joy is healing, because
I love that. Yeah.
Happy people don't go around committing crimes. Happy people don't go around, oh no, that's mine. I want to feel more powerful because happy people are content. People who really feel joy from their belly, from their feet, from the ground up. That's, those moments where you tap into that moment that just makes you smile and everything else disappears, right? You don't need anything. So I find that if we can bring joy into our body, if we can bring safety into our body, if we can invite the ancestors to feel the same, and, and they may be giving us something, they may be healing us and we may be healing them, because, a lot of our ancestors, I think, come from, war. A lot of our land has been, war after war. There's a lot of that stuff, and people survive the way they survive, and they don't get to experience certain things. I think in this age now, dance has become a little bit more, we call it conscious dance, right? People are being so much more experimental with how we dance, how we move. Before, like when I first started doing the 5 rhythms, there was 5 rhythms. Now there's ecstatic dance, soul motion, open floor, all kinds of stuff. There's a lot more that I don't know about, that I'm not remembering, but there's a long list of how much dance is out there.
Sylvie, you do a lot of work in the prisons, I know with the VA, you've worked with vets. And my guess is that some of this work that you're talking about like creating a safe, joyful body and that healing being both in the present and in the past is for the sake of social justice and the world of like, if all of our ancestors are getting well, right? If we're being the best representatives of our line and we're being joyful, safe humans, and our ancestors are receiving those blessings, it makes the world just more easeful for everyone. Am I getting it?
Yeah, that's yeah. I think you are getting it. I think, I feel like we can only work with what we have here. And it is about, when I bring dance into these places, it's about healing yourself. And the other thing that happens with a lot of the veterans also and in the prisons is that it bypasses the personalities and the opinions. You see people from different background, class, culture dance together where they wouldn't hang out outside. I remember being in the prison doing a class there, and one of the public relations person came in and she looked at the women who were dancing together, and she's like, these women would never hang out in the yard together. They would never, they would give each other the eye, and here they are dancing and laughing together. So, I don't know too many other places that happens. And for me, it is about being able to communicate in a way different than the verbal, because I think obviously we need both, but I think sometimes there's too many hidden messages in the words sometimes, or, the mind takes over and there's something when you're dancing, there's not, the mind kind of sits in the back there and just kind of relaxes, and the body is what's in charge. And the body really just wants to be free.
The body wants to be free. I love that. When you were telling that story, like what I saw was not just those 2 women who might never hang out together, but all of their ancestors who might never hang out together, all dancing together and healing together. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I love
not
it.
only do they enter hanging out together, not, because like I say, I think most of our lands have gone through war. Every single country, I'm part Vietnamese and Laotian and French. And, the French invaded Vietnam for a long time. It was a big French, land there. Like they were in Vietnam for a long time. And so for me, it feels like here I have inside of me these 2 cultures, like that one was dominating the other and being, and one was being invaded by the other. And there's this war inside of me. And it's not just in my psyche, but it's in my body. It's in my, in my ancestry. My grandfather was a soldier. My grandmother was, a woman. And I don't know how they came together, but they came together and created my mother. But it could have been so, so this level of bringing healing to, if I can heal myself in healing, and that creates healing for my mother, and that creates healing for my grandmother and my grandfather and their mothers and their mothers and their fathers. It goes back way beyond because we are all connected.
It's really interesting to me, that idea of, I think about this a lot, about victim and oppressor, perpetrator and recipient of crime, and that relationship that gets created. And, I think it's fair to say that many of us have a pretty mixed bag when it comes to our ancestry, right? We have
Yes.
maybe the ancestors that we knew, maybe some of them were like decent, maybe some of them were jerks, or were harmful in the world. But there are also all these cultural, things that you're naming, like race, religion, all of the big isms, that we do embody those paradoxes, right? And it sounds like you're saying that dance is one place that you can be big enough to hold all of that in its complexity without exploding or feeling beyond what's bearable. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Because sometimes, a lot of people can't tolerate some of the things that happen, right? That's why trauma happens. It's traumatic because we can't handle the bigness of events, whether it's war, rape, torture, whatever it is, right? All the stuff, and we check out. We either disembody, the spirit leaves because you can't deal with it. People turn to drug and alcohol. Like the veterans that I work with, a lot of them are in, it's a recovery program, and there's so many recovery programs in there because that's how they deal with trauma. So a lot of people don't want to feel it, don't want to be in their body because it's just too much. So when we start with just a little bit, again, creating safety, just being able to feel your feet, feel your hands, feel the beat of the music, just a beat that you can just nod your head to or tap your toes to, and being able to let that move you. Because I also work with, veterans from the Vietnam War who a lot of them are, with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or in wheelchairs. A lot of people are in wheelchairs, and people are like, how do you dance when you're in a wheelchair? Well, it doesn't matter. If you can tap your toes, you can dance. You can move your fingers, you can dance. And what ends up happening with these guys is that we start, putting on music, they start moving whatever they can. And you can start to see like their smile just starts to come on, and you see something change inside of them. And it's quite amazing for me. And that's why I do the work I do, because I walk in a lot of the, with the nursing home with the veterans, and I go in there and they just sit there, right? You're in a wheelchair, and if you don't have people visiting you, you're kind of there. And if you're able to tap, and they don't, a lot of them don't look that happy. And what I try to do is I try to bring, again, a little bit more joy in their experience in life. And it changes the person. And I think when it changes a person, and then that person changes somebody else, because that also affects the nurses that are in the room. That also affects the doctors that come in, the chaplains that come in. And if their family come in, they see it. So there's this thing that just keeps growing, the more we do it. And it starts with the simplest thing, our body, and moving our body. And I just want to say one more thing is I think the importance of this work is moving the body. And sometimes people ask me, well, what's the difference between like, well, I can just go running, or I can just, that moves my body too. And I think in a way that is good for the body. It doesn't bring the mind and the spirit in. And I think dance, whether it's the 5 rhythms or other conscious dance, at least the way I teach the 5 rhythms is we really bring in the intention of why you're moving your body, of you're bringing in the spirit, or you're moving through an emotion. So that makes a difference between just moving and moving with intention.
It's just reminding me of when I started dancing with you. It was before I had done a lot of work on my own trauma, recovering as a victim of sexual abuse. And I would come and I would dance every week, and I didn't really know like why it was such a call, why I was so called to the dance floor. But like as the weeks and months and years went by, what I started to notice was just more space for me. And I didn't have money for therapy, for fancy, trauma hoo-ha. You let me be on your crew, and I could dance. And that, you're right, that movement, that with intention, is a really effective, free way, low cost, right, that folks can, with trauma, can start to release that trauma. I have a question that came up, if it's okay to ask you.
Sure.
Yeah. So in talking about ancestors and movement and dance, you were saying that sometimes we move in the way that maybe an ancestor moved. And I just wonder, one of the things that I am a white person of Scottish and English ancestry, and it's really important to me to practice the things that my ancestors practiced, to be really careful about the cultural traditions that I'm using, right? And so one of the agreements that I have is to try and remember the songs, the rituals, the prayers that my ancestors did. And I just wonder, like, in your experience or kind of what you've seen, is it possible to remember through dance the ways that our ancestors moved, or just the kind of like the kinds of movements that they did?
Yeah, I think when you invite in the ancestors, you're kind of opening up to what they're wanting and willing to show and offer. And I think sometimes it's through maybe you start moving like they are, or sometimes it'll be through image, or sometimes you'll hear a song, or sometimes something will happen. Like I will be, sometimes I'll be dancing, and all of a sudden I'm doing this kind of like thing that I don't usually do, and it felt a little bit more, from my Laotian culture, instead of, because I was brought up in Vietnam, so I'm not very connected to the Laotian part of myself. I went and visited, and that's where my father's from, but I don't know a lot about it. But, all of a sudden, I'll be moving in a way that somebody that's more Laotian would be moving, and so I think those things kind of come, and it can come to you while you're dancing in many different ways. I don't think it's always, moving like them, but maybe you start seeing them, and then you'll be moving together, and then they may show you how to move, or you may be seeing an image that comes through you, or you may be seeing a ceremony that they were part of. So I think when you're tapping into this part of the spirit, you're also tapping into many levels of your consciousness, and you're tapping into all your senses. So it's not just the physical sense of you moving. You're tapping into the sense of like, oh, I can feel something, that feeling of something. I can see it. I can hear it. I can witness it. So there's that level. And you may be smelling something, a food that maybe it's part of your ancestry. So it taps into all the senses.
That's great. That's a great practice for,
because you're opening up all the senses,
opening up all the senses to remember who we are.
Yes.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Beautifully put.
I'm just curious about if you could just speak to the erotic and dance of how, because, that's kind of the thing that I work with, and how do we start to really connect with our erotic selves through dance?
So that's a really good question, because it's connecting again to your body. And I think a lot of us, the reason that we don't, we're not okay in the body is trauma, but it's also what's been told, like how many of us come from a tradition where you're a woman, you don't show your ankle, you don't show your neck, like everything is covered, right? Everything is, there's so many culture that we got to cover everybody because we don't want anybody seeing it. And for some culture, it's because it's sacred, and for others, it's because it's a shame, So as we grow up with whatever messages we're given, we start to take it in literally. And so when we start moving, we start to feel freer, and we start to be, I keep using the word safe in the body, and we start to feel like we are able to connect to our body in a way that maybe we were told not to. And by opening that door, by opening that way of being inside the body, sex does become something a little less, you start to open to your sexuality a little bit more. And it happens a lot. People fall in love on the dance floor. People have affairs on the dance floor. So there's a lot of, it opens, again, all the senses. And one of them is our sexuality and our sensuality. And it makes it okay. It makes it a good thing rather than something you have to hide or, be behind, shut it off or things like that. So it encourages us to be able to feel it. And I think to some of the things that is also done in there is to be able to move that energy and not just to feel like, oh, I should, not to move it to the extreme where, you may get into something you don't want to get into, or to shut it down. So being able to move it in a way that feels right, that feels like, okay, this is how I want my sexuality to move inside of me. And then you also have ancestors that are very, free with their body, and there is no shame in it, and it is a precious thing. And so it's like, by tapping into those places, by tapping into the place of either shame or joy or sacredness, we get to have a choice. We get to choose. We get to be open rather than this is just what it is. Because a lot of times when we hold things in our body, we don't even know. We don't even know that we're tight until we start moving. We don't even know that we're holding all these things inside. So when you start moving, you start becoming aware of all that. And then you start to learn how to move with that energy and how to really honor it and cherish it.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience. I feel like the dance floor has definitely been a place of really learning to embrace the erotic. And Sylvie, I just feel so grateful, obviously, to be able to speak with you here today about dance and ancestors and trauma and embodiment and safety, but also just really for the place that you've held in the world for so many of us who have been doing the work of healing on the dance floor in the container that you build and hold so beautifully. And just really want to encourage folks to, if you haven't danced to 5 Rhythms, check that out, but also really check out Dancing with Sylvie. She dances every week in the North Bay. And again, her website is www.syzygydanceproject.org. That's SYZYGY danceproject.org. And Sylvie, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you here today.
Thank you very much. Could I also just mention a couple things?
Sure, I'd love to.
That are coming up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm in Sausalito every Wednesday night. I teach the 5 Rhythms there from 7 to 9. And a couple of things that's coming up that I'm really excited about is our medicine circle. We have what's called a medicine circle where we work with dance, movement, ritual, sound healing, and we use the community to really help someone work through their whatever is going on for them. And we've had people dance for themselves, for each other, and a lot of people dancing for their ancestors, dancing for the land, dancing for the bigger picture. And that's on August 6th in San Francisco. And the other thing I'm really excited about is I'm doing a retreat in the Santa Cruz Mountains at 1440 Multiversity. And it'll be a 5 Rhythms retreat with some heartbeat material where we move through the emotions, fear, anger, sadness, and we find joy and compassion in the process of moving through this. So we start with the basic 5 rhythms, and then we add the emotion on top of that. And it's a 5-day retreat that I'm really excited about. So, and that's also on my website. And thank you again for inviting me. This is such a pleasure and an honor to be here.
So thank you, folks, for listening to this episode. I am Pavini Moray, and we will be back with Bespoken Bones every full and new moon with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.